The stars burned bright against the darkness of space as Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his warship. His hands gripped the metal railing as he watched the enemy fleet approach. There were so many of them. Hundreds of alien ships, all coming to destroy humanity's last hope. The year was 2247, and humanity had just met their first alien species. The Zelthrons were not friendly. They came with weapons firing and cities burning. They had conquered 12 other star systems before finding Earth. Now they wanted to add humanity to their list of defeated species. Jake looked at his crew. Young faces, scared faces, but determined. They all knew this might be their final battle. Earth had sent everything they had to this fight. If they lost here, there would be no second chance. All ships, prepare to fire, Jake said into his communicator. His voice was calm, but his heart was racing. The Zelthron ships were massive, 3 times larger than human vessels. Their weapons had already destroyed 2 colonies. They had killed millions of people without warning or mercy. The Galactic Council had watched and done nothing. This was how things worked in space. The strong survived, the weak died. But humanity had one advantage. They had built something new, something the Zelthrons had never seen before. Quantum weapons that could tear through any shield, any armor. It was experimental technology, rushed into production because there was no time left. "Fire all weapons," Jake commanded. Blue light erupted from every human ship. The quantum beams struck the Zelthron fleet like thunder. Shields that had protected them for centuries simply vanished. Hull plating that had never been scratched before melted like ice under the sun. Within seconds, a dozen enemy ships exploded into fragments. The battle that everyone expected to last days was over in 72 hours. The Zelthron fleet was destroyed. Their survivors floated in escape pods, waiting for death or capture. Humanity had won, but the cost had been terrible. Thousands of human soldiers were dead. 2 more colonies had been bombed before the final victory. Admiral Lisa Hammond arrived from Earth 3 days later. She was a tall woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had been fighting wars for 30 years, and she was sick of death. Now she had to decide what to do with the defeated Zelthrons. She called a meeting with all the human commanders. Jake Morrison was there, along with 50 other captains and generals. They gathered in a conference room on the flagship, looking at screens that showed the Zelthron survivors. "We should destroy them," said one general. "They tried to wipe us out. We can't let them survive to attack again." "The Galactic Council expects us to enslave them," said another. "That's what every other species does when they win a war." Admiral Hammond listened to them all argue for an hour. Then she stood up and spoke in a quiet voice that somehow silenced the room. "I've been thinking about what makes us human," she said. "What makes us different from them. The Zelthrons killed millions of our people because they were stronger and they could. If we do the same thing now, what does that make us?" "Survivors," someone said. "Monsters," Hammond replied. "Just like them." She made a decision that shocked everyone. Humanity would offer peace. Real peace, not slavery or destruction. The Zelthrons would keep their homeworld. They would have autonomy to govern themselves. Humanity would help rebuild what the war had destroyed. In exchange, there would be a treaty of non-aggression lasting 150 years. The Galactic Council thought humanity was insane. Every species in known space expected the Zelthrons to be punished, not helped. But Hammond didn't care what others thought. She went on every broadcast channel and made her famous speech. "We won this war because we were smarter and luckier," she told the galaxy. "But winning doesn't give us the right to become killers. We're offering the Zelthrons something they never offered us, a chance to live, a chance to rebuild, a chance to be better than they were." The Zelthrons accepted the treaty. They had no choice. Their military was destroyed, their economy was ruined. But humanity kept its word. Ships full of supplies arrived at Zelthron colonies. Human engineers helped repair damaged cities. Human doctors treated wounded Zelthron civilians. Dr. Daniel Chen was one of the first humans to land on Zelthra Prime, the alien homeworld. He was a scientist who studied alien life. Now he worked alongside Zelthran researchers, helping them rebuild their research facilities. He learned their language, ate their food, and tried to understand their culture. "Why are you helping us?" a Zelthran scientist asked him one day. "We tried to destroy your species." Daniel looked at the alien with his large eyes and gray skin. "Because someone has to break the cycle," he said. "Someone has to prove that mercy is stronger than hate." Captain Ryan Blake commanded the peacekeeping station that orbited Zelthra Prime. It was his job to make sure both sides honored the treaty. He had lost friends in the war, but he believed in what Hammond was trying to do. His 10-year-old daughter, Katie, often asked him about the Zelthrans. "Are they really our friends now, Dad?" she would ask during video calls. "They're not our enemies anymore," Ryan would tell her. "Maybe one day they'll be friends." Years passed, then decades. Trade routes opened between human and Zelthran space. Cultural exchanges began. Katie Blake grew up and became one of the first humans to study at a Zelthran university. She learned their history and their art. She made friends with young Zelthrans who had never known the war. Humanity poured trillions of credits into the reconstruction. They built schools and hospitals on Zelthran worlds. They shared technology and scientific knowledge. The peace became real, solid, something both species could believe in. Admiral Hammond retired after 20 years. On her last day in uniform, a reporter asked her if she thought the peace would last. "I gave them 150 years, she said. "What they do with it is up to them. But I sleep better knowing we chose mercy over vengeance." The galaxy watched in amazement as human and Zelthran children played together on colony worlds, as scientists from both species made discoveries together, as two civilizations that had tried to destroy each other learned to coexist. It seemed like a miracle. A new age where old hatreds could be forgotten and former enemies could become partners. Humanity had proven that mercy was possible even after terrible violence. But not everyone believed in the peace, and time would reveal the terrible truth about what the Zelthrans really thought of humanity's gift. The year was 2397, 150 years after the war had ended. Lieutenant Emma Patterson sat in her chair aboard the science vessel Explorer, watching her screens show nothing but empty space. She was bored. Survey missions in the neutral zone were usually quiet, and this one had been no different for 3 weeks. Emma was 26 years old and had never known war. She had grown up hearing stories about the old conflict with the Zelthrans, but those felt like ancient history. Her generation had lived their whole lives in peace. Humans and Zelthrans traded goods, shared research, and even had joint colonies now. The war was something that happened to grandparents, not to people like her. "Lieutenant, I'm picking up unusual signals," said Alex Cooper from the communications station. He was the ship's linguist, an expert in Zelthran language. "Coming from that military installation we passed yesterday." Emma sat up straighter. "What kind of signals?" "Encrypted military traffic, a lot of it. More than I've ever seen from a routine base." Alex frowned at his screen. "And the encryption is old, really old, from before the peace treaty." "Can you break it?" Emma asked. "Maybe. Give me a few hours." Emma reported the strange signals to her captain, who told her to investigate further but not to worry too much. "Probably just old equipment," he said. "The Zelthrans were allowed to have military bases. The treaty was expiring in 2 weeks anyway, and both sides would need to negotiate a new one. But something felt wrong to Emma. She couldn't explain it, just a cold feeling in her stomach that wouldn't go away. 6 hours later, Alex called her to his station. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "You need to see this," he said quietly. Emma read the translated messages on his screen. Then she read them again, hoping she had misunderstood. But the words were clear. The Zelthrons had been preparing for war since the day the peace treaty was signed. For 150 years, they had been studying humanity. Every human they met, every cultural exchange, every bit of technology shared, it was all intelligence gathering. They had studied human biology to create biological weapons. They had mapped every human colony. They had identified the exact locations of Earth's defense networks, and they saw humanity's mercy as weakness, as an insult. The messages called the peace treaty the great humiliation that had to be avenged. The only way to restore Zelthran honor was to wipe out humanity completely. "Send this to Earth immediately," Emma said, her voice shaking. "Priority 1. Mark it urgent." The message was sent, but it had to travel through relay stations. It would take hours to reach Earth. Hours they might not have. On Earth, Captain Ben Foster was having lunch with his family when his communicator began screaming alerts. He was the commander of Earth's orbital defense network, and he hadn't heard that alarm in 20 years. He ran to headquarters, still wearing his civilian clothes. The Situation Room was chaos. Intelligence Officer Natalie Ross was pulling up reports from monitoring stations across human space. Every screen showed the same thing. Zelthran military fleets were moving into position, hundreds of ships, all heading toward human territory. "How did we miss this?" Ben demanded. "How did they build this many ships without us knowing?" "They built them slowly," Natalie said. "Over decades. We saw the construction, but they claimed they were merchant vessels and research ships. We believed them." President Marcus Webb arrived and took control of the Situation Room. He was a good man who had worked his entire career for peace. Now he had to face the possibility that the peace had been a lie all along. "Get me Admiral Morrison," he ordered. "And someone find out exactly what we're dealing with." Diplomat Laura Martinez stood up. "Mr. President, there must be a misunderstanding. We should contact the Zelthran government immediately and clarify the situation." "The situation is perfectly clear," said General Victor Kane. He was an old soldier who had never trusted the Zelthrans. "They've been planning this for 150 years. They're going to attack the moment the treaty expires." "We don't know that for certain," Laura argued. "Then why are their fleets mobilized?" Kane shot back. "Why are they moving into attack positions?" The debate continued for hours while intelligence reports kept coming in. Each one was worse than the last. The Zelthrans had biological weapons specifically designed to kill humans. They had ships equipped with weapons humanity had never seen before. They had spy networks on dozens of human worlds, and the treaty expired in 12 days. Ben Foster tried to mobilize Earth's defense forces, but it was too slow. Humanity had grown comfortable during the long peace. Ships were understaffed, weapons were outdated. Many colonies had only minimal defenses because no one expected to need them. Emma Patterson's science vessel picked up more signals as the days passed. She could hear the Zelthran commanders coordinating their forces. She heard them discussing target lists, human colony names, human cities, human populations. They talked about humans the way humans might talk about insects that needed to be exterminated. "We need to warn the colonies," Emma told her captain. "We did," he replied grimly. "But most of them don't have the ships to evacuate. And where would they go? The Zelthrons are everywhere." On the final day of the treaty, Emma was monitoring communications when she heard the order broadcast across all Zelthran military channels. 3 words in their harsh language. "Begin the cleansing." Alex translated it instantly, his face white with horror. Across 17 human colonies, Zelthran ships appeared from faster-than-light travel. They didn't bother with warnings or demands for surrender. They simply opened fire. New Seattle colony was hit first. It was a peaceful settlement of 2 million people, mostly families and scientists. The Zelthrans dropped biological weapons from orbit. The colony's administrator sent out a desperate broadcast for help, but there was no help coming. No human ships were close enough. Emma watched the broadcast on her screen. She saw the administrator, a woman named Rachel Morgan, trying to stay calm as she described what was happening. The biological agent was spreading through the domed cities like fire. People were dying within minutes of exposure. Children, elderly, everyone. The broadcast cut off suddenly. New Seattle went silent. Then the next colony reported attacks, and the next, and the next. Earth received the news in real time. Billions of people watched on their screens as colony after colony was destroyed. The Zelthrons weren't trying to conquer or enslave. They were trying to exterminate every human in the galaxy. President Webb sat in the Situation Room, watching the casualty numbers climb. 1 million dead. 5 million, 10 million. The numbers kept rising, and they were only in the first hour of the attack. "Why?" he whispered. "We gave them everything. We helped them rebuild. We treated them with respect and dignity." "Why?" General Kane answered in a flat voice. "Because we showed them mercy, and they saw it as weakness. They've spent 150 years planning revenge for the humiliation of being defeated and then helped instead of destroyed." The Zelthrons broadcast their reasoning to the entire galaxy. They announced that humanity's mercy had been an insult to Zelthron honor. The only way to erase that insult was through human extinction. Emma Patterson stood on her ship's bridge and watched colony after colony go dark on the star map. Each light that went out represented millions of lives ended. The peace that had lasted 150 years was revealed to be nothing more than preparation time for genocide. And humanity, peaceful and trusting, was caught completely unprepared. Dr. Stephen Parker was working in his laboratory when the alarm started screaming. He looked up from his microscope, confused. The lab was on New Seattle Colony, in the science district far from any military installations. There shouldn't be any alarms here. Then he heard the announcement over the speakers. "Zelthran ships in orbit. Biological attack imminent. Seek shelter immediately." Stephen ran to the window and looked up at the sky. Through the transparent dome that protected the colony, he could see dark shapes against the stars. Zelthran warships, at least 20 of them, just hanging there like death itself. He grabbed his communicator and called his wife Jennifer. She was at home with their 2 children, Danny, who was 8, and Lisa, who was only 5. "Stephen, what's happening?" Jennifer's voice was frightened. "The news is saying we're under attack." "Get the kids to the shelter under the house," Stephen said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Right now. Don't pack anything, just go." "But you said the peace treaty. Forget the treaty. Just get to the shelter. I'm coming home." Stephen started running toward the exit, but the laboratory safety systems activated automatically. Heavy doors slammed shut, sealing him inside. The lab had been designed to contain dangerous biological materials. Now those same safety features trapped him. He pounded on the door, screaming for someone to override the system, but there was no one. Everyone else had already evacuated. The laboratory's computer refused to open the doors because it had detected biological contaminants outside. Stephen ran back to the window. He watched as canisters fell from the Zelthran ships, descending through the atmosphere like terrible rain. They burst open above the colony domes, releasing clouds of something that looked like gray mist. His communicator rang. It was Jennifer. "Stephen, something's wrong. People outside are falling down. They're—" Her voice broke into coughing. "Oh, God! Danny just—" The sound of his son screaming came through the communicator. Then his daughter. Then Jennifer, all of them coughing, choking, crying out in pain. "Jenny, get to the medical supplies!" Stephen shouted, knowing it was useless. Whatever the Zelthrans had released, it was designed specifically to kill humans. There would be no cure in a home first aid kit. He listened helplessly as his family died. It took 7 minutes. 7 minutes of them gasping for air that wouldn't come, their lungs dissolving from the inside. He heard his daughter calling for him. He heard his son begging his mother to make it stop. He heard Jennifer trying to comfort them even as she died herself. Then there was silence. Stephen sank to the floor, still holding the communicator. Around him, through the laboratory's windows, he could see the colony dying. People collapsed in the streets. Ground vehicles crashed as their drivers stopped breathing. The gray mist was everywhere, and it killed everything it touched. The Zelthran ships landed 3 hours later. Stephen watched from his laboratory prison as alien soldiers moved through the streets in protective suits. They weren't here to occupy the colony. They were here to make sure nothing survived. Anyone who had somehow avoided the biological weapon was shot on sight. Stephen stayed hidden in his lab for 3 weeks. The containment protocols kept the biological agent out, and he had enough food and water in the emergency supplies to survive. But every day he looked out at the dead city, at the bodies lying in the streets, and he wished he had died with his family. Captain Emma Patterson turned her science vessel into a rescue ship. She jumped from colony to colony, picking up any survivors she could find. But there were so few. The Zelthran attacks had been too fast, too coordinated, too efficient. At Darwin Station, she found 12 survivors out of a population of 800,000. They were engineers who had been working in a sealed maintenance tunnel when the attack came. Emma brought them aboard her ship, but they were broken people. They had lost everyone they loved in minutes. At New Boston Colony, she found no one alive at all. The entire population of 3 million had been wiped out. Emma's crew walked through empty streets lined with bodies, children still holding their parents' hands, families who had died together in their homes. "Why don't they just bomb the colonies?" one of Emma's crew members asked. "Why use biological weapons that take longer?" "Because they want us to suffer," Emma replied quietly. "They want maximum pain, maximum fear. They want every human to die knowing that our mercy meant nothing." On Earth, the news broadcasts showed the horror in real time. The Zelthrons made sure humans could see everything. They broadcast footage of colonies dying. They sent messages detailing their plans to exterminate every human in the galaxy, including Earth itself. Commander Jake Morrison came out of retirement. He was 73 years old now, but he had led the fleet that defeated the Zelthrans 150 years ago. President Webb asked him to lead humanity's defense again. Jake sat in his old office at military headquarters, reading casualty reports. The numbers were impossible to process. 43 million dead in the first week. 12 colonies completely destroyed. 5 more colonies under siege. And it was getting worse. The Zelthrons weren't just attacking colonies. They were attacking supply convoys, rescue ships, hospital stations. They were hunting down refugee fleets and destroying them. They wanted every human dead, and they were using every piece of knowledge they had gained during the peace to do it efficiently. News anchor Gregory Stone became the voice that guided humanity through its darkest days. He broadcast 20 hours a day, giving updates on attacks, coordinating rescue efforts, trying to keep people calm even as the galaxy burned around them. "Stay strong," he told his audience, even though his own voice was breaking. "Help is coming. Our military is mobilizing. We will survive this." But privately, Gregory wasn't sure if that was true. The Zelthrans had spent 150 years preparing for this war. Humanity had spent 150 years preparing for peace. Intelligence reports confirmed what everyone feared most. The Zelthrans had prepared biological weapons specifically designed to attack Earth's biosphere. Once they finished with the colonies, they would come for humanity's homeworld. They would sterilize the planet, making sure that nothing human could ever live there again. Captain Ryan Blake had commanded the peacekeeping station orbiting Zelthra Prime during the peace. Now that station was destroyed, and he was commanding a refugee convoy trying to reach Earth. 50,000 civilians on 20 transport ships, running from the advancing Zelthran fleets. His daughter Katie had been studying at a university on one of the colony worlds. He had tried to contact her when the attacks began, but her colony had been hit in the first wave. The university had taken a direct hit from orbital weapons. There were no survivors. His little girl who had believed in peace between species was dead, killed by the very species she had tried to understand. Ryan didn't cry. He couldn't afford to. He had 50,000 people depending on him to get them to safety. So he locked his grief away and focused on keeping his convoy moving. But at night, in his quarters, he would look at pictures of Katie, and he would wonder what kind of monsters humanity had helped rebuild. What kind of evil had they fed and sheltered for 150 years, only to have it turn and try to devour them? The genocide continued through the winter months. By the time 3 months had passed, the death toll had reached 200 million. The Zelthrans controlled 30% of what had been human space. Earth itself was preparing for invasion, building defenses that everyone knew probably wouldn't be enough. And in a sealed laboratory on the ruins of New Seattle, Dr. Stephen Parker finally emerged from his shelter. He was the only survivor of 2.3 million people. He walked through streets full of bones and dried biological residue. He saw the remains of his neighbors, his colleagues, his friends. He made his way to his house and found his family where they had died, still holding each other. He couldn't bury them. The biological agent had dissolved too much. So he just stood there, looking at what remained of the people he loved most in the universe. Something broke inside Stephen Parker that day, something that could never be repaired. And he knew that the same thing was breaking inside every human who survived. Humanity had offered mercy and received genocide in return. That mercy would never be offered again. President Marcus Webb stood before the United Earth Assembly with a speech that would define humanity's future. His face was haggard from months of watching his species die. His voice was quiet, but every person in the chamber heard him clearly. 150 years ago, we defeated the Zelthrans in war. We could have destroyed them. We could have enslaved them. We chose mercy instead. We chose to believe that peace was possible. We were wrong. He paused, looking at the representatives from Earth's nations and colonies. They have killed over 300 million of our people, men, women, children. They used biological weapons designed during the peace we gave them. They studied us while we fed them. They learned from us while we educated them. They planned genocide while we offered friendship. Another pause. Longer this time. We tried peace. They chose genocide. Now they will learn why humanity fought its way to the stars in the first place. The room erupted in applause, but it wasn't happy applause. It was the sound of grief turning into fury. General Victor Kane activated military protocols that hadn't been touched in 150 years. Weapons programs that had been shut down during the peace were restarted. Technologies that had been deemed too dangerous, too inhumane, were brought out of classified storage. We held back last time, Kane told his officers. We won the war, but we didn't want to be monsters. That restraint is over. This time we use everything. Engineer Melissa Harris led teams that worked around the clock, retrofitting civilian ships for war. Cargo vessels became troop carriers. Science ships became weapons platforms. Luxury cruise ships were stripped down and armed with weapons that could crack planets. How long until the fleet is ready? Kane asked her. 2 months if we rush. 4 months if you want it done right. You have 6 weeks, Kane said. After that, we launch whether we're ready or not. Admiral Jake Morrison took command of the first Retribution fleet despite his age. His hands shook from old injuries, and he needed medication to manage the pain. But his mind was sharp, and he remembered how to fight the Zelthrans. Captain Ryan Blake volunteered as his second-in-command. The man who had once commanded a peacekeeping station was now planning the destruction of the species he had once protected. His daughter's death had changed him into something cold and focused. "We mirror their strategy exactly," Morrison told his commanders. "They attacked our civilians. We attack theirs. They use biological weapons. We use quantum dissolution. They wanted maximum suffering. We give them maximum efficiency." Dr. Daniel Chen sat in a laboratory surrounded by decades of research on Zelthran biology. He had spent half his life helping these people. He had worked alongside their scientists, eaten at their tables, learned their culture. He had believed in the peace. Now he was using everything he knew to help kill them. "Their biology is vulnerable to quantum resonance in a very specific frequency," he explained to a room full of military scientists. "If we calibrate the weapons correctly, we can target Zelthran specifically. Human biology won't be affected." "How specific are we talking?" someone asked. "Specific enough that a human could stand next to a Zelthran during deployment and walk away unharmed. The Zelthran would cease to exist at the molecular level." The room went silent. This was a weapon beyond anything humanity had built before. It didn't just kill, it erased. "How long to produce it?" General Kane asked. "The prototypes are already done," Chen said quietly. "We can begin mass production immediately." Commander Emma Patterson's science vessel was retrofitted for combat. Her crew of researchers and surveyors became soldiers. Linguist Alex Cooper, who had once studied Zelthran culture, now used his knowledge to intercept their military communications and coordinate devastating ambushes. "I spent years learning their language so we could understand each other," Alex said one night. "Now I use it to help kill them. I never thought my life would turn out this way." "None of us did," Emma replied. "But here we are." The transformation wasn't just military, it was psychological. Humanity had been peaceful for 150 years. They had built a civilization based on cooperation and mercy. Now they were remembering what they had been before the peace. Warriors, survivors, a species that had clawed its way out of caves and fought across their homeworld for thousands of years before reaching the stars. The Galactic Council sent representatives to Earth, offering to mediate peace talks with the Zelthrans. President Webb met with them in person. "Surely both sides have suffered enough," the Galactic representative said. "The cycle of violence must end somewhere." "We tried ending it 150 years ago," Webb replied. "We offered peace. We offered mercy. We offered dignity to a defeated enemy. They used our gift to plan the murder of our entire species." "But more death won't bring back those who died," the representative argued. Webb's expression didn't change. "No, but it will ensure they can never do this to anyone else. And it will teach the galaxy that humanity's mercy has a price. When you betray it, you pay with everything." Dr. Stephen Parker arrived on Earth and volunteered for the military immediately. The scientist offered him a research position, but he refused. He wanted to be on a warship. He wanted to see the Zelthran worlds burn with his own eyes. "I'm sorry about your family," Admiral Morrison said when they met. "Don't be," Stephen replied, his voice empty of emotion. "Just give me a weapon and point me at them." Morrison assigned him to a bombardment ship. Stephen would be one of the people who activated the quantum weapons, one of the people who would erase Zelthran cities from existence. It seemed appropriate. The mobilization took 6 weeks, just as Kane had demanded. In that time, humanity built a fleet twice the size of what had defeated the Zelthrans 150 years ago. But this fleet wasn't designed to defeat. It was designed to annihilate. Every ship carried quantum dissolution weapons. Every ship had orders to show no mercy, accept no surrender, and leave nothing alive. The Zelthrans had set the rules of this war when they started Genocide. Humanity was simply following those rules to their logical conclusion. On the day before the fleet launched, Gregory Stone broadcast one final message to Earth and the surviving colonies. Tomorrow, our fleet leaves to face the enemy, not to defeat them, not to make peace with them, but to erase them from the galaxy. Some of you may think this makes us monsters. Some of you may believe we're becoming like them. He paused, looking directly into the camera. But we're not killing them because we enjoy it. We're not doing this for glory or conquest. We're doing this because they proved that mercy is a gift that must be earned, not a right that can be abused. They chose to answer our compassion with genocide. Now they will learn what happens when humanity stops being merciful. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship as the first Retribution fleet prepared to launch. Around him were veterans of the First War and young soldiers who had lost families in the genocide. They were ready. Humanity was ready. "All ships," Morrison said into his communicator. "This is Admiral Morrison. 150 years ago, we defeated the Zelthrans and offered them peace. They used that peace to plan our extinction. Today, we launch not for conquest, not for territory, but for justice. We launch to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone again. All ships jump to hyperspace." The fleet vanished from Earth's orbit in flashes of light. They were headed for Zelthran space. They were headed for war. But this time, there would be no mercy. This time, there would be no treaty. This time, humanity would make sure the lesson was remembered forever. The first Retribution fleet arrived at the Zelthran colony world of Hekthor. Population, 40 million. The same number of humans who had died in the first week of the genocide. Admiral Jake Morrison gave the order without hesitation. "Deploy quantum weapons, full spread, no survivors." The weapons fired. Blue light cascaded down from orbit, touching the planet's surface in thousands of locations. Where it touched, matter simply stopped existing. Buildings vanished. Ground dissolved. Living beings ceased to be at the atomic level. There was no explosion, no fire, no screams. Just instant absence. Within 3 minutes, Hekthor was empty. 40 million Zelthrons erased as if they had never existed. The planet remained intact, but nothing lived on it anymore. Captain Ryan Blake watched from the weapons control station. His daughter Katie had dreamed of Zelthrans and humans living together in peace. She had died for that dream. Now he was making sure the species that killed her understood the price of their betrayal. "Target destroyed," he reported. "No life signs detected." "Move to the next target," Morrison ordered. The fleet jumped to another system, and another, and another. Each time, the result was the same. Human quantum weapons bypassed every defense the Zelthrans had. Their shields couldn't stop weapons that operated at the quantum level. Their armor meant nothing against beams that unmade matter itself. Where the Zelthrans had needed biological weapons and ground troops, humanity used precision strikes from orbit. Where the Zelthrans had taken hours or days to kill a colony, humanity ended worlds in minutes. It wasn't cruelty. It was efficiency. Dr. Stephen Parker stood at his station on a bombardment ship, activating quantum weapons again and again. Each time he pressed the button, another Zelthran city stopped existing. He felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just empty determination to make sure his family was avenged. Commander Emma Patterson's combat vessel led attacks on Zelthran military bases. Alex Cooper intercepted their communications and listened to the panic spreading through their forces. "They're calling us monsters," Alex reported. "They're saying we're worse than they are." "Then they don't understand the difference," Emma said coldly. "They attacked civilians for genocide. We're attacking them to end their threat forever. They started this. We're finishing it." The Zelthran military tried to fight back, but they were unprepared for humanity's ruthlessness. They had expected humans to follow rules of war, to accept surrenders, to spare civilians. But humanity had learned from the Zelthrans themselves that there were no rules. After 3 months, The Zelthran government sent a message offering surrender. Admiral Morrison read it on his command screen. They promised to stop fighting immediately. They offered to pay reparations. They begged for mercy. Morrison forwarded the message to President Webb on Earth. Webb's response came back within an hour. 3 words: no mercy given. Morrison broadcast his reply to the Zelthran government and every species in the galaxy that was watching. We gave you 150 years of peace. You returned it with genocide. You used our mercy as a weapon against us. You studied us while we fed you. You planned our extinction while we rebuilt your worlds. There will be no surrender. There will be no treaty. There will be no mercy. Your species chose this path. Now you will walk it to the end. The campaign continued. Human fleets systematically eliminated Zelthran worlds one by one. But they were careful. They didn't exterminate the species completely. That would have been too quick, too merciful. Instead, they reduced the Zelthran population from 40 billion to under 10 million. They destroyed every military installation, every shipyard, every piece of advanced technology. They removed the Zelthrans from every conquered world and relocated them all to a single agricultural planet with no industry. Captain Ryan Blake personally commanded the operation at Zelthra Prime, the homeworld he had once protected. He watched as the quantum weapons erased the capital city where he had once worked alongside Zelthrans, who had smiled at him while planning to murder his species. Dr. Stephen Parker stood beside him on the bridge. Neither man spoke as the city vanished. There were no words that could express what they felt. The peace had been a lie. The friendship had been betrayal. And now, the bill was being paid in full. The war lasted 1 year total. By the end, the Zelthran Collective no longer existed as a spacefaring civilization. They had been reduced to a pre-industrial society under permanent human guard. General Kane established garrison fleets in orbit around their world, not as peacekeepers, as prison wardens. They will never leave that planet, Kane announced. Their children will grow old and die there. Their children's children will work the fields and forget that their species once traveled the stars. They will live out their existence as a reminder to the galaxy of what happens when humanity's mercy is betrayed. Admiral Morrison traveled to the Galactic Council headquarters to address the gathered species. The ancient civilizations who had watched humanity's original mercy with contempt now looked at the human fleet with fear. Morrison's speech was brief and direct. 150 years ago, humanity defeated the Zelthrons in war. We could have destroyed them then. Instead, we offered peace, reconstruction, and dignity. We spent trillions helping them rebuild. We shared our knowledge and our culture. We believed that mercy could break the cycle of violence in the galaxy. He paused, looking at the alien representatives. We were wrong. The Zelthrans used our mercy as cover to plan genocide. They murdered 300 million humans, including women and children. They created biological weapons using research we shared with them. They attacked refugee ships and hospital stations. They sought to exterminate our entire species. His voice grew harder. Let the fate of the Zelthrans be our answer to any species that mistakes human compassion for weakness. We tried peace once. We rebuilt our enemy. We showed mercy to those who tried to kill us. That gift was answered with genocide. It will never be offered again. The Galactic Council sat in silence. No one argued. No one protested. They had watched the human campaign and understood the message clearly. On Earth, construction began on a memorial at the ruins of New Seattle. Every name of every victim was inscribed on walls that stretched for kilometers. 300 million names. 300 million lives lost because humanity had believed in peace. At the center of the memorial stood a simple message carved in letters 10 meters tall. We gave them peace. They chose genocide. Never forget. Never again. Dr. Daniel Chen visited the memorial every week. He carried the guilt of helping the Zelthrans during the peace, knowing that his research had been used to create the weapons that killed billions. He never forgave himself. Captain Emma Patterson retired from the military and became a teacher. She taught young officers about the cost of trusting too deeply, of believing too readily in peace. Her students learned from humanity's terrible mistake. Commander Ryan Blake never spoke about his daughter Katie again. Her picture sat on his desk for the rest of his life. But he couldn't talk about her. The loss was too great. The betrayal too complete. Gregory Stone continued broadcasting for another 20 years. He documented humanity's transformation from peaceful explorers to careful guardians. He made sure the story of the Zelthron betrayal was taught to every human child, so the lesson would never be forgotten. Dr. Stephen Parker never returned to research. He remained in the military, serving on garrison ships that watched over the Zelthron homeworld. He wanted to be there to make sure they never recovered, never forgot what their betrayal had cost. The galaxy learned its lesson. In the centuries that followed, no species ever tested humanity's mercy again. When human ships appeared, other civilizations were respectful and cautious, not because they loved humanity, but because they remembered what happened to the last species that betrayed human compassion. Humanity returned to the stars, but they were different now. They still explored, still built, still created, but they never again offered unconditional mercy to a defeated enemy. They never again trusted that peace was natural or that other species shared their values. The era of human mercy had ended in blood and betrayal. The age of human deterrence had begun, and the Zelthrons, reduced to primitive farmers on a single world under eternal guard, served as a living reminder to the galaxy. Humanity's greatest strength had been their compassion, but their greatest weapon was what they became when that compassion was betrayed. The peace had lasted 150 years. The war had lasted 1 year, but the lesson would last forever.